cafe anyway.
Mike's Daily Podcast.
How are we today? Are we okay? How'd you like that inauguration? Did you watch it?
Mike's Daily Podcast.
Well, it's on YouTube if you'd like to. I found it interesting and I watched it on the YouTube, but I didn't see it live. Aw, I wish I did, because then I'd be all, I hope he gets in. Hope nothing happens that prevents him from getting in, like a former president saying, you were cheating.
Mike's Daily Podcast.
Unfair. What do you call it? Tiddlywinks. No, the other thing.
Mike's
The thing.
Daily
Mischief. The
Podcast.
I'll think of it later.
Yeah.
Yes. Shenanigans. There we go. So, the last thing Trump said, he had that speech that he had videotaped and then videoed. There's no tape involved these days. And it went on, Netflix, Twitter, something. And he said, and we want, most of all, we want him to have luck. It's a very important word, luck. Luck is a very important word. He wants Biden to have luck. And he didn't even really mention Biden, did he? So, whatever. That ended well, didn't it? It finally... They say, things end with a bang or they end with a whimper. This was kind of a whimper, and it's done now. But is it? It's the question. There's the question mark at the end of the show. At the end of the movie. He'll return. He'll come back, whatever that other party is. He may start the Patriot Party or something. We'll see how that goes. It hasn't done well in the past in the history of America. You had Teddy Roosevelt come back with the Bull Moose Party, but he still lost. But yet...
And here's today's podcast picture.
Didn't Theodore Roosevelt, he didn't want to run again? He said, no, I've done enough. But then he regretted it and he wanted to come back. I think that's what I saw in that Ken Burns documentary. Oh, you know what? So that happened today, the inauguration. But what else happened today? I'm walking along on a street that I used to walk on with the late great Basil the Boxer all the time in Podcastro Valley. And I'm walking along, and in front of me, that's right, Basil, you and I, we walked everywhere in Podcastro Valley. Just ahead of where we used to walk, Basil, just ahead right there, right over there, was a truck, a white truck that belongs to a friend of mine. And I see the white truck, and I look down, and all of a sudden... No, actually, I didn't look down. I kind of saw this as it happened. Although it's hard to say, when you think in the past tense of something crazy that just has unfolded in front of your eyes. There's a car driving along behind my friend's car. Well, all of a sudden the car rams right into the back of the parked car, my friend's parked car, on the street. Just out of nowhere, this lady ended up smashing into the back of my friend's car. Oh, and hit the car so hard, his truck, it was up on the curb. A truck. And her SUV, she hits this truck, knocks it up on the curb. So basically the back corner of my friend's car is all messed up. And the front corner of the lady's car was all messed up. She was fine. Debris everywhere. My friend happened to be home. And I, had to let him know what was going on. Oh, it was just the weirdest thing. I'm just going for a little walk, and all of a sudden all this drama unfolds in front of me. But the podcast picture has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the station I worked for back in 1990. Was it 91? early 90s, I think for about 3 years, I worked for a station called KNJO. It was in Thousand Oaks. It doesn't exist anymore. KNJO stands for Conejo, because it's called the Conejo Valley. And now I am sometimes heard on a station that uses the term Diablo Valley. So I went from one valley to another. But KNJO played soft hits. And when you mash those two words together, you end up saying, you could try it right now, wherever you're listening to me. Say those two words together, and you might end up sounding like you're saying another two words together, because the soft and the hits kind of get meshed together. Anyway, you had to be very careful how you said the slogan for the station. But it was soft, classic hit songs by Bread and the Carpenters and all the 70s mellow hits. Some of the 60s, too. But it was Dan Fogelberg and Jim Croce's mellow stuff, Cat Stevens, Bee Gees, you name it. It was all that. So I found the coffee cup the other day, so you'll see a podcast picture of that at MikesDailyPodcast.com. By the way, I'm trying to grow a beard right now. I'm going into my late pandemic. Hopefully this is the latter part of the pandemic. Late pandemic beard. So you will see that, my lumberjack look. Oh, well, I don't have it in the podcast picture, but soon. Oh, in the video that I post on the YouTube page, youtube.com/MikesDailyPodcast. You'll be able to see a little bit of my peach fuzz that's growing on my face. I would like to now play a little part of Biden's speech, and actually we'll go outside a cafe anyway before I do that. And the reason why I want to play it is because he brought up something that was sort of a theme during the inauguration. In fact, Amy Klobuchar, remind me, she's a senator, right? And she is a American lawyer, politician serving as the senior United States Senator from Minnesota, a member of the Minnesota Democratic Farmer Labor Party. Okay, so she's a Democrat. Well, it was interesting, hearing her speech and underlying the theme of a more perfect union. I guess that was the theme of the whole inauguration. As we go outside a cafe anyway, we're bringing Mike's Daily Podcast somewhere in Podcastro Valley, the last place on earth. So Biden had this one part in his inauguration speech where, by the way, Clinton, Pelosi, and Obama looked like they were sleeping at one point. And even, was it Biden's daughter-in-law that was up there as he was getting sworn in? Oh, and yay, Kamala is now our vice president. And there's a lot of firsts with her being our vice president, as you know and have probably heard. But that's great. So what we had was a couple sleeping Democrats up on stage. You had Pence and George W. Bush. The Republicans were up. Those were the Republicans up there. And Mitch McConnell. But, okay, so Mr. Biden had this to say. I mean, now our president Biden said this to say. And I like this line here about how he's talking about no more lies for profit and power. That really struck. I like that. And I hope we all remember that we got to be careful about the lies that we hear and that we just follow. And everybody, it's just this weird thing in our society today where we are so swayed by whatever social media we follow. I mean, I'm hoping we all have a mind of our own, that we can think for ourselves, that we can process all this information, and that we all have a curiosity about facts. And that we try and see behind the curtain of where we're getting our information and see, are they really giving us facts, or are they trying to make a profit off of me? Anyway, this is what the president said.
Respect, honor, and yes, the truth. Recent weeks and months have taught us a painful lesson. There is truth and there are lies. Lies told for power and for profit. And each of us has a duty and a responsibility as citizens, as Americans, and especially as leaders. Leaders who have pledged to honor our Constitution and protect our nation, to defend the truth and defeat the lies. Look, I understand that many of my fellow Americans view the future with fear and trepidation. I understand they worry about their jobs. I understand, like my dad, they lay in bed at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering, can I keep my health care? Can I pay my mortgage? Thinking about their families, about what comes next. I promise you, I get it. But the answer is not to turn inward, to retreat into competing factions, distrusting those who don't look like you, or worship the way you do, or don't get their news from the same sources you do. We must end this uncivil war that pits red against blue, rural versus urban, conservative versus liberal. We can do this if we open our souls instead of hardening our hearts, if we show a little tolerance and humility, and if we're willing to stand in the other person's shoes, as my mom would say, just for a moment, stand in their shoes. Because here's the thing about life. There's no accounting for what fate will deal you. Some days, when you need a hand. There are other days when we're called to lend a hand. That's how it has to be. That's what we do for one another. And if we are this way, our country will be stronger, more prosperous, more ready for the future. And we can still disagree.
So big day today. Hopefully we'll have a more perfect union, and we'll try to look more upon what makes us all similar versus what makes us all different, what binds us together versus what separates us. And look who's outside a cafe anyway, somewhere in Podcaster Valley. Hello, Mike Matthews. It's Chely Shoehart, shop supervisor. Oh my gosh, that was a great inauguration. I watched it and I fell asleep too. Great. Look who else is here. Hello, Mike. This is Floyd the Floorman. And this is John Deere, the engineer. Mike, that beard looks really good on you. You should keep growing it. Yeah, just peach fuzz at the moment. But yes, working on that. Everybody's growing a beard in these days of the pandemic. Finally, I'd like to say I've been watching Kath and Kim on Netflix. And as I'm watching it, it's a show from Australia that was done between 2002 and 2007, thereabouts. I suddenly realized, oh my gosh, there was an American version of this with Molly Shannon and Selma Blair. And it was, I remember I watched a couple episodes of the American version, but the Australian version is so much better. Because when it got Americanized, there was all this stuff they couldn't touch, whereas the Australians just dive right into it. They don't care. Plus, there's this bizarre thing. I didn't know this is a thing about Australians. They really like hot dogs. They're always throwing hot dogs in the microwave and dipping it in ketchup. And they don't even use a bun. They just grab a bunch of hot dogs, microwave them, and chomp on them. Which reminds me of something else I've seen on YouTube lately. The guy feeding all those raccoons in his back. He's got this back deck area. He lives somewhere in Nova Scotia, and he's got like a thick Nova Scotian accent, you know. And the nice guy, it looks like, and he feeds all of these, and people scream at him because he's basically domesticating all these raccoons that now can't fight in the wild because they're getting free hot dogs from him. I mean, a bucket of hot dogs. And then he tells you where he goes to get the hot dogs. Oh, I got them like 10 for $1, don't you know? And he's dumping them all out and giving them to, and you know, the raccoons grab it with their little hands. They got little hands. And then he gives them a bunch of grapes, which you're not supposed to give to dogs, I know. I didn't know raccoons could eat grapes. And then he gives them a bunch of Hydrox Oreo cookies. But that's not what they do on Kath and Kim. They just eat a bunch of hot dogs. And then you're listening to that great accent that they do. And then she does this thing to her daughter, is this 30-something, just spoiled, rotten kid. Thinks she's the one that walks on water. And the mom will say to her, Kimmy, look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me. It's the greatest. That's the little catchphrase. Ha ha ha. It's on Netflix. Watch it. It may make you laugh. All right, hopefully it's a new day. It was a weird day, a day of promise, and a day of drama and despair because of my friend's car getting hit really bad. Oh. And he was telling me that a friend of his that used to borrow his truck all the time, because if you got a truck, everybody wants to borrow it. Hey, I want to move some rocks. Could I borrow your truck? I want to move a piano. Could I borrow your truck? Can I borrow your truck? Can I borrow your truck? And he would let this guy borrow his truck all the time. Well, now this guy, apparently, his friend, has bought a truck. And you know what day he bought his truck? Today. So just as he's buying his truck, my friend's truck is getting smashed. So he was joking that he was going to call his friend and say, hey, I need to borrow your truck. Next show, it'll be the wonderful Benita, the Disgruntled Fiddle Player, and the Brewmaster. Thank you for listening. Tell me what you think about any of this. Disagree, agree. Perhaps you want to disagree and say you want a more union, a disunified country, a more unperfect union. Maybe you want that, or an unperfect onion. Or maybe a perfect onion is what you would like. I don't know. You can let me know. 336MM Daily. That's 3 + 3 = 6. MM as in Mike Matthews. Daily as in what this podcast will try to be. Hey, I got a little sidetracked. Let's see. Sunday, I had to... Yeah, there was a bunch of stuff. Oh, and I had to I got a ticket for driving my Saturn Vue. And it hadn't passed smog yet. But the mechanic had told me you got to drive the car in order to pass. So to reset the little chips, the microchips that count the emissions, that wasn't working properly. So the mechanic reset them and said you got to drive. So while I'm driving the car, I get a ticket. So I had to write this long letter to explain to the judge that, look, the car is gone. I've junked it. It's no longer a threat. Can you take my fine away? We'll see if that works. So any of your legal tips on that matter, you can call 336MM Daily or listen to what A-Frame has to say. And you can contact me there. Okay, thanks for listening.
Mike's Daily Podcast is written and produced and performed by Mike Matthews. His podcast is super easy to find. Download or listen to his show and read his blog at MikesDailyPodcast.com. Email Mike now at MikesDailyPodcast@gmail.com. See you tomorrow. Bye.
Look at me, look at me, look at me. And that was FF episode 2188, 2188. More FF episodes at MikesDailyPodcast.com.